Welcome back to the Finding Financial Fitness Show. Today we have a special guest, Jeffrey King. So Jeff King does the dream coaching for life success and legacy. And if you've been listening to the show, chances are you've heard the podcast with Chris Bay from LSL discussing the infinite banking concept and how that can be implemented into our lives. But LSL takes it a step further, and they take it to coaching and dreams and what the whole goal of what we're trying to do with both IBC in the LSL world, what they're trying to do, what clients are trying to do. And for us, if you've been listening to the show, you know, Pei and I are very goal oriented. We like to have a goal and then work backwards and start implementing things on our daily lives to meet our bigger goal. And I did my dream conversation with my wife, with Jeff, probably 2-3 months ago, after being in IBC for a couple years now. And it was just so eye-opening, and it made me appreciative. It made me thankful and gave me that kind of North Star of what I was looking for, making sure that everything that I'm doing and the decisions that I'm making are within that big goal of what we're trying to achieve. So Jeff is an Enneagram teacher, does his own coaching, helps with clients. And I won't go into what an Enneagram is because I barely can pronounce it. So Jeff, explain to myself.
We just learned.
You're quick. You're fast learners. You did a good job.
I was calling it an angiogram yesterday.
Angiogram. I'm not qualified to do an angiogram. I'm not the guy you want for that.
Jeff,
metaphoric heart doctor.
There you go. Metaphoric.
There you go.
So
well, thanks.
Enneagram.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me on to your podcast. I also have a podcast, and it's always wonderful when people gift you with the honor to be on my show. So I'm really honored that I get to be on somebody else's. So, so the Enneagram is a personality typing system that helps identify how your kind of patterns of how you think, feel, and feelings are both the feelings you're comfortable with, but also the feelings you're not so comfortable with. And then how those kind of play out in behavior and how we interact with the world around us, as well as with ourselves. And it just gives us kind of a deep dive into that structure, that strategy of how we manage our life, what works for us, when do we think everything's in good shape and we're okay, and when things aren't. And it also helps us to recognize what are those natural things that we look for in life, what we assume to be true in life, what makes us feel safe, what our overall goals and motives are. And what it does, it identifies 9 specific types. That's what Ennea indicates. Ennea is Greek for the number 9. And then gram is about diagram. And the Enneagram is charted out on a circle with 9 personality points spaced around the circle. So it just gives us kind of a pathway to understand ourselves and hopefully give us the capacity to have a more accurate understanding of ourselves, but also meet that with compassion. So accurate and compassionate understanding of ourselves, which then frees us up to have an accurate and compassionate understanding of other people. So it's very powerful for personal growth, but also creating better relationships. Whether that's, primary partner, family, work related thing, work teams. And I think it goes out into the community and potentially could impact the world in a very positive way. So that's kind of a brief thing. It's been around for quite a long time, but it's really caught traction here in the last probably 15, 20 years. It's become a lot more popular, a lot more publishing around it. And I got certified with one of the couple of leading Enneagram schools in the world. I was fortunate enough to land in one of those communities and attained their certification as an Enneagram teacher a couple of years ago. And so that's kind of the brief synopsis of what it is.
So what is your day like, or what is that session like with your people who reach out, right?
It kind of depends on what we're working with. Just recently, I did a staff retreat with the local Chamber of Commerce. We had about 8 to 10 staff members, and I went through the pattern, each of the 9 types, and talked about how those types tend to interact with each other, and knowing what each staff member typed out as what their leading Enneagram type is. And so I just helped them understand, this is why that kind of maybe pushes my trigger. So I do group presentations like that. But I also do a lot of individual and couple coaching. So I take people, I have a whole 90-minute process of interviewing people and help them identify what their type is. If they don't already know, there's also online tests that people can take. But I like the conversation or the interview process because it gives us the opportunity to really tease out, well, sometimes I'm like this, but in other times I'm like that. And so which one of these do I check here? And so it kind of helps be able to unpack that why in those certain situations we respond the way we do. And then I do follow up with that to help them understand what their type is, what pathways of growth and development, which is kind of a unique piece to the Enneagram typing system, makes it different from some of the other personality systems out there like Myers-Briggs, where there's not so much where we go from here and how do we grow, how do we develop, and how do we integrate the other types into our life. So I do coaching to help people follow up with that. And then with whatever it is that they, kind of brings them to the table asking for help, whether it's marital conflict or I just feel stuck in my life, don't know where to go next, or I keep repeating the same patterns over and over again. And I don't get it. Why do I keep doing that? To, again, organizational, executive leadership coaching. So there's a whole variety of things like that. So,
Jeff, would you mind explaining briefly the 9 personality points you mentioned?
So again, they're spaced around a circle. So there's no hierarchy. Not one's better than the other. They all belong. They're all important. But it's just, again, 9 different ways that we kind of orient and see the world. So the type 1 is more of the reformer, the one that wants to improve things, bit of a perfectionist. They see things in a clear right, wrong, good, bad. There's a right way to do it. And they get really honed in on that. Type 2 is more of the helper, the giver, connector. They're the ones that are always networking, kind of helping out, seeing what needs to be done. And they're there to meet the need. Kind of think of Rado O'Reilly back on the old MASH show. He would be the epitome of a type 2. He sees the need. He knows he's already there to meet it before anybody even asks. Chris Bay, the type 2, who connects. If you experience him, he's always, I got this. You connect, because they just love to be very helpful. Type 3 is more of the achiever, performer. They kind of value their worth by what they can accomplish. And so they kind of read the crowd and they pick up what's going to sell, what this crowd wants, and they know how to deliver it, the goods. And that could be very entrepreneurial sales kind of thing, or it can be just in conversation. They can talk shop with whoever and know how to connect. But they love to get stuff done. So that's kind of the achiever and performer. Also, sometimes they say they get a lot of stuff done, but they want to look good doing it too. Because sometimes they can be a bit image conscious. They want to appear like successful and accomplished. 4 is more of the individualist, romantic. They go very deep in their feelings, and everything is about feelings. They kind of define themselves by what they feel. And they want to give authentic expression to it. So they're kind of a lot of artists, songwriters, poets come from that 4 thing because they know how to go deep and they know how to express it. They bring beauty and life to the world in that way. 5 is more of the investigator, the observer. They're kind of the more engineer, sit back, analyze. And they may not participate so much because they're thinking it through. And they kind of conserve their energy to make sure they've got what it takes to deliver the goods with that. So sometimes 5s get a little stuck with paralysis by analysis because it's just always spinning in their head, and the opportunity sometimes can pass them by. 6 is a more troubleshooter, a little bit more of the worrier, kind of seeing what could go wrong and want to know, and they've got a plan to meet it. So they're always thinking ahead, worst case scenario, and are we prepared? So that's 6 brands that when COVID came around, it's like, we already had our safety kit all put together before because we knew something like this could happen. So when stuff does happen, they're like on their A game. And so they'll ask a lot of questions to make sure, everybody's, we got a good solid plan. And they also tend to be very loyal because once you earn their trust, they lock in. So they are super loyal friends, and they also can be very loyal to causes, to the business, whatever it is that's providing that structure for them. 7 is more of the adventurer, kind of the fun-loving, wanting the next kind of inspiring, fun, exciting thing to do. So their mind is like popcorn, always thinking, always dreaming, always thinking, oh, this could be great. Because they think that the answer is always out there somewhere, that it could be the next thing. So they're very great dreamers, come up with great ideas, but sometimes they don't finish things so well because they get a little bored with the mundane and they're ready to go on to the next project. So 7s are great. The page pointing to her. So 7s are great idea people, but often you have to hand the project off to somebody who's like a 6, who's more methodical and make sure it gets done. And then they're on to the next thing. And then the 8s are more of the take charge, sometimes called the boss, because they have a lot of energy that goes outward and they're going to conquer whatever obstacle they perceive is in their way. They don't want to be, they kind of see the world in 2 ways. There's the weak and the strong, and you can't afford to be weak. So I've got to be strong. And so they come at it with that energy. But they really, they know what needs to be done, and they take charge, and they've got the energy to follow through with it. Excuse me. And then the 9s are the peacemaker, more the mediators. I lead with type 9, and 9 sits at the very top of the circle, and they see all of the other 8 perspectives, and they want to harmonize it all together. Mm-hmm. So we're very good at listening to people and helping mediate, bring peace. The challenge with us 9s is that we're so invested in everybody else's agenda, we kind of lose sight of our own. And we kind of sometimes blend into the background or to the wallpaper instead of really being present and accounted for, because we're good if you're good, kind of a thing. So that's a brief synopsis of the 9. So
that is fascinating because as you were going through each of the categories, and I'm sure people have multiple, right?
Well, there's, we actually have all 9 in us, but we have one dominant one. But we also then have close relationships with other types that give us a unique blend of how we do what we do. Yeah.
Right. You must have, I was like, people's name and faces were popping into my brain as you were going through. I'm like, oh my God, that's so-and-so, and that's what so-and-so.
Yeah. When you look up type 9 in the dictionary, my picture is going to be there. So.
Right there.
So you mentioned, Jeff, that, different people will have that. We all have them within us, but we have one stronger one. And then you also mentioned how that can kind of counterbalance in others. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious from a relational standpoint, and I'm thinking about from a finance world, as in, because most people that go into like a finance journey, they are not doing it by themselves, right? They either have a partner, they have a business partner, they have friends. Same thing on their health journeys. The most successful health individuals tend to be the ones that have a workout partner, a training partner. So how do you feel like the 9? So if someone was a 7, let's say, what would be their best counterbalance? I'm not saying to go out and date.
That's a great question, right? And some people sometimes kind of misuse the Enneagram. They think, okay, I'm only going to date a 3, whatever. Yeah. The reality of it is all pairings can make a great partnership, couple, whatever the relationship is, if both partners or both people are doing their work. Because the thing with the Enneagram, each of the types have incredible strengths and gifts to offer, but we tend to get locked into those. And we're often unaware of the fact that those strengths, because we overplay them, also become liabilities. And so each of the type also has kind of a shadow liability, weak side that can get in the way of effective relationships. So the idea with the Enneagram is we're always striving for is self-awareness. This is how my pattern or my structure works. And this is the stream it takes me, and I'm on autopilot, and I don't know it until something brings awareness to it. So the Enneagram is all about kind of, in fact, what we often say is there are people who say, I don't want to do this kind of stuff because I don't want to be put in a box. And I always say, well, that's fair. No one likes to be in a box. That's demeaning and dehumanizing. But the reality is we're already living in a box. We just often don't know it. So the Enneagram gives us a gift of a flashlight to turn on and see what's in my box. And then once I see it, and again, this is where the compassionate and accurate understanding of ourselves needs to come in. Once we see it, it's like, oh, so that's what I do. Now, then I can look over the edge of my box and, oh, there's 8 other boxes out there who all are doing the same thing I'm doing. They're living out of their box. And so for a relationship is to be able to say, oh, because each type has, again, its dreams, its basic fears, motivations, what makes them feel comfortable, what makes them feel uncomfortable. And if we can understand that about each other and about ourselves, then we don't have to take the other person's behavior or their approach so personally, nor do we need to get reactive. Now we can meet each other in a place of understanding and compassion. It's like, well, of course. So like with finances, for example, there are some people who say money is for safety and security. Mm-hmm. So we want a lot of money in our bank account or whatever, or IBC policy, whatever, because that allows me to relax and feel like my world is in order. And now I can function well. Well, that person may be paired up with somebody whose belief system is like a 7. It's about money is there so we can have adventure and go out and experience life, because you never know how long you're going to live and when we're going to die. So if money is about, and what good is a bunch of money when you're dead? Let's go live life. So the question often in that partnership often will result is that one feels like they're right and the other's wrong, because the other person's natural approach creates anxiety for me. Mm-hmm. And so now I'm going to convince you why you're wrong. You got to come my way. Mm-hmm. But if we can see ourselves and say, oh, this is what drives me. Now we can meet in the middle. How can we get a win-win here? Enough that does provide wise security, but also use the other so that we can do what we want to, what our values in life are. So that's where I think it can really come in handy. And it's also a nice check and balance, because if you just have 2 7s together, they could blow through their savings account and be up to their ears in debt and not even know what they did because they're so busy out there doing the next adventure kind of a thing. Yeah. Or if you have a couple of 9s together, you may never get anything accomplished because it's just nice to sit and watch the world go by. So that's a way this could be used in those kind of things.
What I love about the Enneagram is we've talked about on this podcast before about what gets measured gets improved. And I know that sometimes people, like you mentioned, don't like to be categorized in a box, but if you don't know where you're starting, how can you identify where you're going? And this is in fitness. If you're trying to lose weight, trying to gain muscle, if you don't know what your baseline is, how do you know how to change? Exactly. If you don't know what your financial situation looks like, if you don't know what your budget is, how are you going to know how to make improvements? So I think this is so powerful in terms of understanding our own personalities and then partnering that with people. So you mentioned the potential flaws, the potential downsides of each one of the 9, right? Because there are going to be flaws associated with that. Let me ask you this way. Do you have people that come to you who almost take this too far, where their identity is so rooted in, no, I'm a number 3. I know I'm a number 3. Right. I can't change that about myself. Yeah. How do you address that?
Yeah. Well, I think just some good education, kind of like IBC. If we educate and get to understand it, then we can work with it more effectively. And so in that, it would be like to get this idea, we are not our number. We're more than that. There's something more substantial and more of the essence. We just do that as a way to compensate for our assumptions, fears, that sort of thing. So never are we to use any tool like the Enneagram as an excuse to just keep doing what's destructive. Well, I just can't help myself. That's no. Okay. We need to have some education about why we even we're doing this work, is so we can see that and with grace and compassion work towards changing. We have other options here. So for me, my downside as a 9 is that I often don't show up in conversation and relationships with people and voice my own opinion. People like that in some ways because I'm easy to get along with. But if you're in a deep relationship with me, that can be very frustrating because you never really know where I'm at, where I stand. And so my wife and my children, they need me to speak up, to be present and accounted for, so they know who they're relating to, so they know me. So that's where I recognize, okay, that's my niceness can also be my detriment, because I can just kind of nice things away and not take action when action needs to be taken. So yeah. So that, I don't know if that helps answer that question, but that's,
I think that's super powerful to have that self-awareness. And once you learn, and be coached properly at how to use this tool, just like any tools that we have or strategies, at our fingertips, like, it's almost like I joke. It's like, you're gifted with a Ferrari, but you don't know how to drive a car.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a great car, but if you don't know how to properly utilize it and use it efficiently, you might, first trip you take the car out for a ride, you crash into the tree, right? It's just it's a powerful tool. Anything that's powerful can kind of come around and like kind of bite you in the tush, right?
Sure.
So I just remember, I think I did a session, not with you directly. I'm like itching to call you up and do my session now.
Yeah, wonderful.
But I did a kind of, I think, a watered down version of it with Chris Bay way back, maybe 6-7 years ago, maybe longer. But I just remember sitting in that meeting to myself, like, at the time, I think I was more immature. I was like, okay, I just need to give some shallow answers and get through this part. You know what I mean?
And if you lead with the type 7, stuff like this can be a bit of a challenge because you're chomping at the bit to get out and do life, Yeah. And it's like, but for the 7 to say, but if I can stay present with this and go through the process, it will free me up to even better things on the other side of this. And so that's funny. That kind of makes sense though.
But now understanding it better, I'm thinking, man, I missed my opportunity, right? It's
all part of the growth process. So it's not a missed opportunity yet.
So Jeff, you do this, you speak with people, you get their general number or an idea of them, what numbers they're merging. How do you then take this information to then implement goals, both short-term and long-term goals? So how do you find out someone's a number 1, they're a reformer, or they're an achiever, number 3? Right. How do you then say, okay, based on that, let's identify your goals and let's create a plan to make those goals?
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because there are some types that are very just naturally goal-oriented. Goals are their mother tongue. I mean, they set them, they're living them, they're doing it. And then other types, goals are like very elusive. It's really hard to identify and, conceptualize and make them in any way concrete. So just even with that, there's, a work of being able to explore why that is, because there can be advantages and disadvantages of both of those too. So basically with that, as we work with people and we identify, what's not working, where are you now? It's kind of like the dream conversation is like, where are we now and what's not working? And what would be our desired outcome 3 or 5 years down the road? Now, what are some steps in between? So again, according to each type, there's going to be specific areas that are going to be really important stepping stones. So for a type 1, for example, who has a very clear, almost rigid idea of what is the right way to do this, because they get they in their less developed state can get really locked in. It's got to be this one way. And so just be able to say, okay, this week, go out and try 2 other options and see how that works for you. How do you experience that? The other thing with type 1, I'll pick on them a bit. They tend to get really rule bound and they're very duty balance of what's the right thing to do, and they have this inner critic that drives them to always do right. It's almost like, so how can you go out and quote break a rule and have some fun this week? Mm-hmm. What would be fun for you? And you just go do it without having to justify it. No one's probably going to make a movie out of that, because it's like, but these are like fundamental shifts that redirect the whole ship, and can change the course of a life. Like, oh, wow. Because the whole idea with the Enneagram is finding a way to relax the type so that you can experience a more expansive opportunity. Mm-hmm. So sometimes for really high driven, goal oriented people, it can be, can you just, maybe the goal today is, I'm not going to have any goals.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. I'm just going to be, I'm going to live life and let whatever's present be enough. And that, for some people, their lips turn blue and they just think about that, because like, what?
Right.
No, but that's part of the whole human experience, because it's always, again, it's the integration. All these types are all part of us. And we often overplay one, and then we tend to underplay a couple of the others. And so it's just very fascinating.
So I'm curious, because something that came into my mind right now was, right now, let's say you have a dream conversation, and I'm using Pei as an example because she mentioned this 6 to 7 years ago. Pei might have been a different number with different goals. So as we set our goals, and maybe one of our goals is to change our numbers. We want to be more like the number 3 than a number 9. How do you implement that to understand that the times change, that when we go from our 20s to our 30s and we have a dream conversation 5 years down the road? Do you preempt that by telling somebody, hey, if your goal is to be more of a number 2 or 3, do these things, and then we reevaluate in a year or 2 years?
Well, there's some language around that. So for one is, from the Enneagram perspective, your type never changes. This kind of a roadmap that leads us all throughout, and that's okay. It's not like it's a bad thing. Remember, there's no hierarchy. Everyone is legit. But what we're aiming for isn't to change our number. It's that we become a more integrated expression of that type, so that I have more options out there. I'm 65 now, and I can see my 9 trait from my earliest memories as a child, all the way now to where I'm at. But hopefully, because I've done work, so I'm always kind of oriented towards peacemaking, harmonizing. How do I make others feel good about themselves? Not in a manipulative way, but a genuine, I really care about you. And so I own that, and I celebrate that. But I also, with that, want to integrate the other options out there, that even by doing that, I can still give my opinion, even if it might disagree with somebody, and create conflict. That's not the end of the world. So that's where I draw from the other types to kind of like, how do they do that? And how can I relax my initial reaction, go to autopilot response, and say, slow down, relax. This might be a good opportunity for you to speak up. Somebody else, like a type 8, it would be, slow down. You don't have to take charge, or you don't have to use your anger at this moment. You can relax and let's let somebody else step in, or let this play out. So that would be kind of the for your question is, and this will change as we move through the life cycle, because we're always developing, and life circumstances are always changing around us. And it calls for us to develop, change, adapt, grow, or we're going to be stuck and be a pretty unproductive place. And so recognizing what those are, and to see, so with my understanding of my personality structure in this situation, what tends to get me stuck, but what would also bring more liberty, more opportunity, more expansiveness in this. So that's a little deeper work than just, go out and do 10 push-ups tomorrow.
It reminds me of, Nelson Nash's saying, rethink your thinking.
Yeah.
And that one, it seems simple, but it's actually pretty difficult to do, right?
Yeah.
Because we are so set in our ways. And, we kind of almost it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy when you're set in that, like, and I tend to do that to myself. I would say, like, yeah, I'm just not a good person with follow through. Like, I'm an ideas person, right? And right after the idea, I'm done, right? I'm like, okay. Like, I would literally buy a course, like a training course, because I'm so excited and I want to learn this new idea. And then once I purchase, the minute I hit submit and I receive the receipt, I'm thinking, who can I farm this out to learn this information and just give me the cliff notes? That's literally what
Yeah. And knowing that's probably what makes you very successful in what you do and a great leader, because I know this about myself, but I also know where I need help. That's brilliant. That's really great. And so, going back to this changing thinking that Nelson talks about, it's a very simple concept. It's just not easy to do.
Absolutely not.
There's a big difference between simple and easy.
It's funny because thinking about all the personality types, thinking about the different numbers, it makes me realize, and I wish people knew this more, why blanket nutrition advice, blanket financial advice does not work for people. Because
same thing. Yeah.
It has to be individualized. Everything has to be tailored. If you're a number 7 and you analyze everything to death, and I give you 5 different diets to choose from, you're never going to implement the diets. But if you're a number 3 and you have a goal, I can just give you this one diet and just say, look, follow this to a T. I know my wife is like this. When she was doing her bodybuilding competition, it was no matter what the coach told her to do and to eat, she would do it without even questioning it. And I mean, to a T. And so, but knowing the different personality types, I think, is so important, because then it allows us as coaches, practitioners, just friends, to implement an effective strategy for those people. And I think the sooner that both the individuals can understand themselves, then they can take that into a meeting or a coaching session with their coach and say, look, I'm more like this. Can you tailor a program based on my needs? And that's kind of a two-way street.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah. I have a master's in marriage and family therapy, the same kind of thing. It's not just with finances or physical training, whatever. It's with relationships too, that there's no one, template that's going to fit everybody exactly. Everybody come at, we come with this with our own individual stories, backgrounds that all shapes who we are bent towards personality. Yeah. So to be able to really tailor that, I think, is just really crucial.
And I'm just thinking now, I have been on a journey. I talked about this on previous podcasts where I'm looking for my next level coach, right? And now that I know better, I'm almost thinking like, oh man, like the previous coaches that I hired, I don't even know if they're qualified anymore. At the time I didn't know, but it's almost feel like to be an effective coach, to be a good coach, you really almost need this training so that you can be not just like a very mechanical, like here are the 5 steps you need to do. You also, to have a great coach, you have to be a great mentor, right? And I think these 2 words are sometimes interchangeable, because I'm just curious, right? You implement that in your IBC coaching life. You obviously do a lot more than just like, oh, here's your policy and then this is what you do. You go way beyond. And that's kind of like, how do we find people to do that work with us?
Well, one thing I've just really been amazed with LSL and the team that Mike and Chris have put together is they have all these different pieces of people who kind of have their niche, and know how. And instead of just putting all in one, I can do it all. Like, well, I don't know anybody that can do it all, because we all have our natural gifts, and we have the things that we're not so gifted in. And why not bring somebody in who's super gifted in that and not feel threatened by that? I don't have to be the one star here for everybody. So, but yeah, and with the IBC approach with LSL, I really do believe we're much more interested in just selling an insurance policy. We want to enrich people's lives and create good, deep, healthy relationships. And so I think it's just a brilliant and wonderful experience with LSL in that. So.
Yeah, I think it's cool to be able to, like you mentioned, I think LSL, that is their biggest strength, the strength in the numbers of each individual. So if you have any type of client that comes in, there is a coach for them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's huge. I know for myself as a dietitian, when I was kind of in my career, I gravitated towards the goal oriented and the high achievers. So if I'm working with a client, I wanted the elite clients. I wanted the elite athletes who really wanted to push themselves, because that was my personality. And that's what I knew that about myself. But I would always find it more difficult to work with other personality types, other numbers, if you will. And I think that even as a coach coaching others, the coach needs to be coached. Right. And there's never a point, in my opinion, where the personal growth journey stops. It's just a consistent evolution. There is no end goal of personal development where you feel like, okay, I've arrived, I'm done. And I think that you go ahead, Jeff.
Oh, I got the diplomas hanging on the wall. Yeah, it's a finished product.
And that's what I was going to say. Yeah, it's I've met myself with MFTs just for therapy on my own, and just as friends. I have psychologists who are friends, and just talking to them, you learn that the most effective counselors, the most effective therapists are the ones who can connect on an individual basis, just like Pei mentioned right now with the struggles of finding a coach that's that right fit. But maybe it's not looking for the brightest and most successful coach, but rather the coach that's better for your personality, even though they might not be doing what you think is quote unquote successful, but it might be the thing that you need to get you to that next place in life.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think, guilty number one is always looking at like, how many followers does this person have? Right. I want the best. I want, Tony Robbins.
Show me your bank account.
Right. Exactly. And as we talk about rethinking your thinking, I'm learning that may not be the right fit for me. Or maybe I need more than one coach, right? Each one dedicated to different things. So this is fascinating and interesting for me.
Yeah.
For real. No.
I think it's so going to kind of the individual level, right? We're talking about this, but on kind of the macro level, you mentioned that you go into companies, right? You'll do some of the teachings with it. What are some things that you have found in successful companies when you do these presentations? When you find out the personality traits, are the most successful companies the ones such as LSL that have all this diversity of the different numbers? Or is it you find a successful company in that you have a bunch of 3s and 7s working together because they're so in sync and it just makes the company thrive? What do you feel is beneficial from a business standpoint?
I'm not a business guru, so that's not my expertise. But where I would go with that question, I think it's a fascinating question. Where I would go with it is, how are they beneath the surface? How are they in terms of their own self-awareness, their capacity to work with themselves honestly, manage themselves effectively, and with that then create effective relationships within that company. I also am certified with Trust Centric, which is an assessment of tool that assesses organizational trust, and particularly 3 areas. One would be our competency. Do we do what we claim we do, and do we do it well? Problem solving. How do we adjust when we need to make changes? And are we open to even admitting we have problems? And when we see them, are we willing to work and are we skilled in doing that? And then third one is, how are we with relationships? Do we treat each other with dignity, respect, honor? And I think those things maybe more so than a company that has really entrepreneurial 3s and 8s and know how to go out and get stuff done. Because you have companies who the bottom line right now looks like they're making lots of money, but they are very dysfunctional within the company itself. And you kind of know their days are numbered if they don't address that. Because eventually the breakdown of trust breaks down everything, including the bottom line.
Right. So you can almost see, like, if a company, let's say, like, I'm looking to get a job and I'm researching the company that I'm, interviewing at, you can actually find data on their, like, employee turnover rate.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Coming from a teacher background, I remember, how, certain schools have huge turnover rate. Every year you got all new teachers, on staff and all that. And that is a problem, and if the organization can't recognize that, then
because if you see that, it's kind of like numbers don't lie here. You're showing us something that needs to be paid attention to, and in the data with the trust assessment, it's interesting that there's a gap between what the top level CEOs, whatever top level management, what they assume the trust level is, and then what the trust level is with the people in the trenches. So that's there. And then if there is a high level of turnover, I think they say it costs like 7 times your salary to replace an employee, or whatever. It's a large number. It is very costly to lose employees and have to bring new people on. And if you're doing that over and over and over again, there's some real issues that need to be addressed. So,
I know that's so interesting. This whole conversation has just been eye-opening, because it's one thing to talk about it, and it's another thing when you have this kind of niche topic where you have an expert in that topic who knows, but then this can apply to everybody. It's not like, oh, this is just one thing that people can't use. I think every single person, because we all fit into one or maybe multiple of these boxes, and the sooner you can identify that, the sooner you can propel yourself forward and achieve your bigger goals, be it fitness, be it financially. So I think, just kind of to recap, we discussed what the Enneagram is, how to say it correctly, which I think is so important.
You both got an A on that. Well done.
We talked about your daily sessions, what it looks like, how it means to, okay, we've defined it. What does it mean on a day-to-day basis when you're working with people? And then relationship wise, I think that was that to me is a big takeaway of understanding yourself and understanding in others, and how there's maybe not be the best compatibility, but there's no such thing as the worst compatibility. It's all about each individual making it work and being open and willing. And with that being goal setting, right? We talked about different ways to, how are we going to integrate what we've learned about our personalities, about our numbers into our day-to-day lives, and then make that to our bigger goals. And then lastly, talking about businesses, just more because we were curious about, I know Pei and I know of one particular business who could probably benefit a lot from this, from not knowing and not being able to reflect internally. I think you could see that. Then you see the complete flip side to that with LSL, where they are implementing it, they're integrating it so well and so effectively. So very eye-opening, very, very exciting to learn about. Jeff, I want you to just tell people where they can go and find you. I know you mentioned you had a podcast. Could you share what the podcast is, where people can go to connect with you if they want to learn more about this, or maybe set up a time to speak with you?
Yeah, a couple of avenues with that. You can just simply email me at jeff@transmuto.org. My nonprofit that I have for my Enneagram work, I call Transmuto, which is a Greek Latin term for transformation, because I'm all about personal transformation that hopefully can bleed out into and do world transformation as well. So it's TRANSMUTO. So Jeff@transmuto.org. My website's transmuto.org, of course. My podcast is 9 Lives with Jeff King, and you can find it on Spotify, the Apple Podcast, and wherever I think podcast streaming is at. And then Instagram is TransmutoKC. And my Facebook is just simply Transmuto. So those are different ways you can find me and connect. So yeah,
that's so fantastic. That is awesome.
You bet.
I think that just one last thing. I think a lot of people don't even realize that they need this work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I hope our listeners will take advantage of this and take some action.
Well, thank you so much.
Jeff, anything you want to leave the listeners with, kind of sum it up, a big takeaway?
Just one little thing you mentioned as you were kind of summing things up. There's the change and growth only happens if we can willing to reflect on what we see about our life or what we experience. Because sometimes people, experience will change you. Now, experience by itself doesn't change us. But where change comes is when we are willing to reflect on it and learn from it and make appropriate adjustments with what we're seeing. And so I love that idea, the sense of reflection. It's so crucial. And that's really what this whole work with the Enneagram and other tools like this, it's really about, again, reflecting and creating self-awareness. So thank you so much for giving that platform to address that. So,
of course. Pei, any final thoughts?
I just felt like we were, talking at like a fire pit, somewhere and doing some s'mores. I think that's we could go on for hours just talking about that, but that's really how I felt like the whole time. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And time to reflect.
Yes, thank you.
Amen. Pei, thanks again. Jeff, thank you for joining us.
Thank you guys. Thanks, Pei. Thanks, Nino.
You guys take care. Thanks again, everybody, for joining in to the Finding Financial Fitness podcast. Stay tuned for more great episodes. Take care.